Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 29th of March of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates and details, so let's start. And first we're going to discuss once again the massive missile strike, not just missile strike but also using drones of Russian Federation all over the entire territory of Ukraine. There were lots of explosions and mainly the Russians were targeting and attacking the Ukraine energy facilities. And for example, this is the picture that was provided by the Ukrainian sources of Russian attack. There are lots of arrows and lots of roads that the Russian missiles and Russian drones bypassed during the day. And just as a picture for statistics for understanding of the situation, but I would like to, let's say, point your attention to this red line. Pay your attention to this red line. And as you can see, according to the Ukrainian sources, one of the Russian missiles entered the territory of Ukraine, bypassed the entire Ukraine almost till the western part of the area, and then missile went to the south and it disappeared somewhere above the territory or on the territory of Moldova. So the same picture was provided by the Russian sources, and according to the Russians, they was in the same road of attack, but the Russian missile haven't entered the territory of Moldova, but basically bypassed and, let's say, was came down somewhere in the vicinity of Transnistria. It's nothing important, it's not a big deal, but anyway, it's very interesting to understand what was the real destiny of that missile that bypassed the entire Ukraine and fell down somewhere either on the territory of Moldova or on the territory of Transnistria. Anyway, the Russians bombed Ukraine heavily, and as we discussed, the Russians mainly were targeting the energy facilities and so on. Today, according to information we have, the Russians destroyed Kaniv power plant. That is some kind of dam, as you can see, through the Dnipro River. We have just this picture and some reports in the Telegram that the dam was targeted by the Russians today, but we don't have any geolocated proofs of that strike. If we move further, we have reports about explosions in the vicinity of Kamyansk, and maybe the sources were Cherkasy, to be precise, the explosions in the vicinity of Cherkasy, maybe the sources were talking about the Kaniv power plant. Then we're moving further to the, let's say, a town by the name of Kremenchuk, and there is another power plant, and when talking about this power plant, we have some geolocations. On this video, we can see the explosions. As you can see, there were two explosions in the area of that power plant. Also, it's like hydro power plant, and as a result of those attacks, those strikes, the Russians managed to deal significant damage to this power plant. Very likely the plant was heavily damaged and the Ukrainians lost possibilities to use this for further, let's say, energy support operations or something like this. Anyway, this is probably third or fourth power plant or fifth power plant in a row during the previous days that was damaged and destroyed by the Russians. If we move further along Dnipro River, we can find ourselves in the area of the village by the name of Kamyanska, another power plant along the Dnipro River, and today we have at least 3 reports that the Russians attacked the area. And most of them we got this morning at, let's say, 10-11 a.m. of the local time. And according to information we have, it is reported that the arrivals were in the area of the Sredneprovskaya hydroelectric station, after which power outages began in the area of the station. And we have some video of drone flying above the area, and probably those were the video of strikes. Interesting details that those were not just the only power plants damaged during the day. Also, a few more strikes we can find in the area by the name in the city of Kryvyi Rog, to be more precise, in Zelenodolsk, another Zelenodolsk power plant. We don't have geolocated videos of arrivals or something like this, but we have some fresh satellite photos of fire anomalies, and according to the open source information, there is a fire anomaly exactly in the area of this power plant, which confirms that very likely the power plant was either damaged or even destroyed. Power plants were not just the only targets of the Russians. The Russians also continue attacking and destroying the gas storage in the village by the name of Stry that located to the, let's say, in the western part of Ukraine. And according to information we have, the Western countries were using this storage for collection and accumulation of gas for European Union, but now we see the Russians also decided to attack the area regarding the fact that the gas basically very likely belonged to European Union. So that was another black day for Ukraine. Lots of damage. Now the Ukrainians have problems with electricity. Now they need to make some schedule for different regions, when one region should be turned on, when another region should be turned off. So the situation is critical. And now let's move further to the situation on the ground. And before we start discussing the area, I would like to show you one video that took place on the borderlands between Belgorod and Kharkiv. The video was added on Mapsoftly. On this video we can see the concentration of proxy Ukrainian forces that call themselves Free Russia, or many other different titles. The Russians managed to discover the main base of that proxy Ukrainian forces, who were involved in operation on the borderlands. And after the Russians discovered the area, they attacked this territory with Tornado S missile, and as you can see, as a result of the strike, they managed to deal significant damage to the proxy Ukrainian forces. So just the video that was published right before I start making the video, so I decided to show the results of the strikes. And I remember that a few days ago, or maybe a day ago or something like this, the sources reported that as a result of Russian attack, they managed to damage and to attack a camp of Ukrainian or proxy Ukrainian forces with a number of 300 soldiers in the camp, and around 200 Ukrainian soldiers were wounded, and up to 100 soldiers lost their lives. And now we are moving to let's say to the ground situation, and let's start from Kherson direction. And once again, I would like to share with you my opinion that Ukrainians increased the use of different Western types of weapons like JDAM air bombs, aviation bombs, and HIMARS missiles. And during another day, today, for example, the Ukrainians published additional videos of destroyed Russian anti-air defense systems and artillery systems with the HIMARS strikes. Now we see that Ukrainians probably received additional batch of this type of weapon. Now they start wasting them as much as possible. So this is very interesting, where the Ukrainians got these missiles, when did they got them, and when they're going to, let's say, waste them or use them. Now let's move to the south Donetsk direction, to the area of Velika Novoselovka. We have some updates I would like to discuss with you then. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians continue bombing and attacking the area using FABs. And on this video, for example, we can see the Russian, let's say, FAB 500 arrivals on the territory of Ukrainian positions, probably some temporary positions that were destroyed as a result of attack. So when talking just about this video, there is nothing special, maybe just interesting angle and interesting quality of the video. But the Ukrainians also published another video of another Russian attack along the T-05-18 road with one personnel carrier BTR-80, BTR-80, and the Ukrainians stopped the Russian attack with FPV drones. So you can say that there is nothing special as well. Just one armored personnel carrier was heading towards Ukrainian positions and was basically destroyed as a result of counter FPV drone strikes. But the Ukrainians also published another video in the vicinity of Zavitna Bazhanye. In this video of the same brigade of armed forces of Ukraine, we see additional videos of FPV drone strikes against the Russian armored vehicles. So if we summarize these three videos, we can make a conclusion that during the previous 48 hours, the Russians made first attempt to attack Urozhaine, Staromayorsk, basically Vremivka tactical bridgehead, with significant number of armored vehicles, personnel carriers, and infantry. The Russians were stabbed by the Ukrainian counter, let's say, strikes with FPV drones. So the Russians were attacking something like this, and this is probably the first video for the previous half a year when the Russians tried to attack on the line between Zavitna Bazhanye and Urozhaine. Currently we don't know for sure whether the Russians managed to achieve some results or the entire attack was repelled completely and the Russians were forced to fall back, but anyway, we see the first attempts, and this is very important. Now we are moving to the original or classic South Donetsk direction, the area between Kurakhova and Novomikhailivka, where we got one of the most interesting updates. Before we start with Novomikhailivka, we'd like to share with you the video in the vicinity of Kurakhova, above the Kurakhova water reservoir. On this video, we can see how the Russians destroyed as a result of a missile strike or aviation bomb strike. I can't believe that the Russians do have this accuracy with bombs. If they can attack the bridge, short bridge, with aviation bombs, it's of course probably can be compared with anything if they have such technologies. So what can you see on the screen is that the Russians destroyed the railway bridge along above the let's say Kurakhao water reserve, and as a result of the strike the bridge was destroyed. We are talking about this small bridgehead between these two, let's say, surfaces. So the Russians currently we can't tell for sure that the Russians managed to ruin the entire logistic. Maybe that strike was a test strike, so with aviation bomb to check the accuracy of that type of weapon. But anyway, from the other side, we understand that more or less the Russians managed to reduce the Ukraine's logistic possibilities either in Krasnogorovka, Maximilianovka, and of course Georgievka. So that was a very, let's say, important strike as a part of Russian offensive on this direction. Now we are moving to Novomikhailovka, where we got the most important updates. Today we have already adjusted the map confirming the fields under Russian control, and today we got additional videos from the area. First, we received report from the Russian sources that the Russians managed to bypass the fields and to enter this residential area by the name of Mashina-Stроитель, Mashina-Budavnik in English and Ukrainian, and but without geolocations, just the photos from the Russian sources. Later we got the video of Russian attack. On this video that was published by the 79th Air Mobile Brigade, separate Air Mobile Brigade, we see Russian offensive, we see Russian armored vehicles enter the minefields, and then the Ukrainians were FPV droning them, and the video was published by the Ukrainians, so that's why we shouldn't expect any, let's say, breakthrough operations or something like this, just the loss among the Russians. But anyway, once again, according to the sources we have, the Russians very likely or probably managed to establish control over this part of Novomikhailovka, and of course, and to force the Ukrainians to fall back from this area towards Paraskovyevka. And of course, if this information confirms, then we can say that the days of Novomikhailovka are completely numbered with the fingers of one hand or something like this, because very likely we understand Ukrainians have no chances to hold the area in this artillery pocket, almost semi-encircled from three directions. Very likely, if this is the current configuration of the line of combat contact, the Ukrainians have already started withdrawing process towards Konstantinovka, or at least those who can still withdraw. So I will not be surprised if we receive tomorrow or the day after tomorrow or by the end of the weekend that the Russians managed to establish complete control over the village. And I would like to point your attention to this video of the main supply road that goes to Novomikhailovka. On this video we can see the movements of some Ukrainian forces from Novomikhailovka towards Konstantinovka. So basically this is retreat process, but the roads were already under fire, complete control, and something that was running away was destroyed by something as well. So this is the situation. We're expecting additional updates, and very likely this is going to be the end of the battle, and the Russians will start clashes for the next town along the line of combat contact, and this is Konstantinovka. We can say, when talking about artillery duels, the Russians have already started, because currently when we were talking about the battle for Novomikhailovka, the main Russian focus of counter-artillery duels, of attacks against supply support warehouses, took place exactly in Konstantinovka. But now we see that the focus slowly, step by step, is moving further to the west, which confirms from the other side that Konstantinovka is currently the town, the new village on the line of combat contact. Another video confirming the Russian movement of artillery focus. Another M777 howitzer was destroyed somewhere in the vicinity of the village Linka with a Lancet strike. Further to the west, in the vicinity of Lizavetovka, the Russians bombed the area using multiple launch rocket systems. So the focus are very far from Konstantinovka. This is currently the area of counter-artillery duels, and so Konstantinovka is the next. Konstantinovka is the next. We'll see whether the Ukrainians are able to hold this area for a very long time. But even if the Ukrainians are able to hold this area very long time, the Russians don't need to capture this at the first stage. They need to reach the road 0524 and to start movements from the Russian sides towards Vadiana and towards Uglidar from this direction. The Russians don't need Konstantinovka. They need the road and to get as close as possible and to semi-encircle Uglidar. Anyway, the progress is significant. Now we're moving to Avdiivka direction, as you can see, there are some icons, but when talking about some changes on the ground, we can say that according to information we have, there were no progress on the ground. Just one exception of Russians bombing Ukrainian positions in the area, which confirms either this area is in the gray zone or at least under Ukraine control, this one. But as you remember, most of the mappers have already shown this territory as the Russian controlled territory. The most important updates, as usually these days, are coming from Berdichi. Of course, there were reports about further Russian additional progress, about capturing of additional territories, but to tell the truth, the most important update is this picture. For example, if you take a look at this picture for the first time, and if you don't know what is written above this post, of course, it will be very difficult for you to understand the value and the meaning of this picture, but I would like to describe this in details. What can you see in this picture? I would like to point your attention to this vehicle and to this vehicle. According to the Russians, these are first Russian assault robots. First Russian assault robots, and the main purpose of these robots is to support Russian offensive, to clear trenches, to attack the Ukrainian forces, and the most important, to replace Russian soldiers on the ground. And according to information we have, these robots, let's say, help the Russians much. According to the sources, they shown themselves from a very good perspective, from a very good side, and according to information we have, the Russians are planning to develop this technology. And I'm not saying that's tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, but very likely by the end of the day, by the end of next year, or maybe even this year, these drones can replace significant number of Russian stormtroopers on the ground. Not to replace them, it's maybe not wrong word, it's a not correct word, but to add, to improve, to let's say complete the storm squads, not just by the manpower but also by these robots. And this is very interesting, and the sources are promising us to give us more details and longer version of the video of operation, how these robots were operating in the area. Anyway, this is the future. This is the future of this, even maybe of the special military operation. Now we are moving further to Bakhmut Artyomovsk direction. We have a lot of geolocations, but we have no progress on the ground. More reports about additional fabbings and additional control over some tree lines and trenches. We have additional fabbing of Chasiv Yar. We have FPV droning of Bogdanovka, of Chasiv Yar itself, of Klishchevka, of fields, but without any progress on the ground. And so we'll see what is going to be next. Maybe the Ukrainians managed to redeploy additional reinforcements, so that's why the Russians are so slow, but we need more details, more information. Very interesting details are coming from Razdulovka Sivers direction. As you can see, there is no icons of drones. If you remember, during the previous days, since the beginning of March, there was significant Russian focus in the area with artillery, with stealth and tower systems, with FPV drones. The Russians cleared this area as much as possible, and today we got just one icon from the area, and this icon tell us that the Russians during the day, during the previous 24 hours, made a small attempt to attack Razdulovka on the ground. The Russians managed to advance additional 700 meters, yet we don't have any reports whether the Russians managed to enter or not, but the things that we were talking, speculating and projecting is becoming true. So the Russians started the ground operation to the Sivers from the south. We have certain activity in the vicinity of Sporne, and we see the reduce of Russian activity in the vicinity of Belogorovka. After dozens of attempts from the Russian side to storm the area from different directions, the Ukrainians managed to repel every single Russian attack, and now the Russians are forced to fall back, to regroup. Obviously, regrouping is going to take some time, not a day, maybe more, week, 2, 3, even maybe a month, and after that, the Russians will make more attempts to attack, or maybe by this time, the Russians will be able to capture something like this on the southern part of Sivers direction, and then there's going to be no need to attack further, let's say to Belogorovka, because most of the biggest part of Seversk offensive operation will be completed by the southern progress. But of course, I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but this is the only reason why the Russians can't stop any attempts to attack Belogorovka. We haven't received anything from Tirany. The Russians, by the latest updates, managed to get as close as possible, but that's it. Northern Kupiansk direction as well, nothing interesting. Very interesting and reported updates are coming from Moscow. And according to information we have, this report, those accused of committing a terrorist attack in Crocus, in their initial testimony during subsequent interrogations and other investigative activities with their participation, reported that their actions, both on the preparation stage and after their armed attack in Crocus City Hall, through voice messages. The incident was coordinated through the Telegram messages by a man who introduced himself to them under a pseudonym, fake name, nickname, reports the Investigate Committee of the Russian Federation. On the instructions of the coordinator, after committing the crime, the terrorists drove in a car towards Russian-Ukrainian border to subsequently cross it and arrive in Kiev to receive the reward they were promised. So today the Russian Investigation Committee discovered that the terrorists were heading to Kiev to get some rewards. We can't tell for sure whether they're planning to get rewards from Zelensky himself, but anything, this is a very strong evidence to recognize Ukraine, not Ukraine, but at least some people in Ukraine as a terrorist, and to give the Russians possibilities to do whatever they like with terrorists, as they usually did in the past. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.